Thank you so much for joining me today. What is your name and the short title of your story?
Hi, Steph. Thanks for having me. My name is Stephen Curtin, and the title of my story would be "Escaping the Medical Pharmaceutical Matrix." I believe I decided on.
Okay. So
So,
tell me about your childhood. What was life like for young Steve?
I am Gen X. I was born in 1974, and so I grew up in three separate decades, basically 70s, 80s, and 90s. But most of it was the 80s. That was the bulk, and I guess I was a pretty typical 1980s Gen X family. There was a lot of love in the house, but there was also passed on generational trauma and a moderate dose of alcoholism and drug use. It was the 80s, 70s and 80s.
Hey, the Coke was
Yeah,
good then.
yeah, right. And I thought about this recently. I talk to people with trauma all the time, and I talk about trauma all the time. And I thought, I didn't really experience a lot of trauma, but when I really think about it, you know, I mean, of course I did. Most of us did. My issue with my trauma that I have to work through is that like I view it through the lens of I grew up in a loving family. There's no doubt about it. Like most of my memories are positive. Like but my parents didn't know what they didn't know, and they passed on what was passed down to them from their parents, and so on and so forth. So when I look at the things that I went through that were traumatic, I don't look at them in a negative light because it was overall the atmosphere was loving. My parents just didn't know what they didn't know, and there's a lot of things that I did raising my children that I regret because I didn't know. So that's why it's good to always kind of talk about these kind of things so people can sort that kind of stuff out and break the cycle. But I was basic middle class. I had everything that I needed. I had a standard American diet before it was a standard American diet, if that makes sense. It was mostly whole foods. I ate a lot of it was probably a lot more meat based than what people eat today, but it was a good diet. I was healthy. I was metabolically healthy. I was active. I played a lot of football. Back then, we had a real physical education in our school um, every day, and our school was three stories. We had to walk up and down the steps all the time, and we lived in a very analog age back then. There was some video games. We had our Atari 2600. We had our Segas, our original Segas. That's how old I am. But mostly, we just like to go out and play and play. We rode our bikes, did our BMX stuff. So it was a lot different growing up back then than it is now. It's kind of horrifying to see people grow up now and the harm it's causing people. So
Okay. So it sounds like you were active. You had, a typical Gen X childhood, complete with actual physical education, good
hmm
food, lots of sunshine.
yep,
What
yeah,
what
decent
part
food.
what parts of your childhood, other than, the lightly referenced trauma, what parts of your childhood were difficult?
Um, I'm not sure if I would call this difficult. It was just an aspect of my personality. Like I was one of those kids that I didn't really fall into any kind of category. Like I wasn't like a nerd or a jock and I wasn't popular, but I wasn't unpopular. And I wanted like very desperately to fit in, but I couldn't. I was always socially awkward. And I was one of those people where like if I showed up at the party, like they weren't excited to see me there. Like some of the kids, some of the popular kids, if they were at your party, it was awesome. But it wasn't like, oh my God, what is he doing here? I was just there. It was just like this. Um, like I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It was just weird. I just never ever fit in. I was always awkward. I didn't know how to talk to people, and I never fit in with cliques or groups which kind of served me as I got later on in life because it allowed me to kind of reject the harmful societal norms that I currently um, forcefully reject today. So it was kind of good and bad. It was frustrating. Excuse me. And but at the same time, I think it was actually in retrospect, a good um, characteristic to have, just because I didn't want to. I never fell in with the crowd, and I never fell into established patterns of thought that everybody was expected to think. And I
Okay.
don't know why that is. It's so weird. I always think about it. I don't like. I think a lot of people think about, like, when they're not part of the mob. A lot of people have a real superior attitude about it, and I don't, because I think about why I don't fit in with the mob, and I never understood why. I'm just grateful that I didn't. It was, you know, I guess I'll make a lot of references to the Matrix. It's so cliched, but if you ever watch the Matrix, it's basically a perfect mirror of our reality. But like, there's that small segment of society that they go after that just does not, like, they can tell something's wrong with the world. They don't know what it is. Um, but they can't explain it, but it's there like a splinter in their mind driving them mad. That's me. That's been me my whole entire life. I've always questioned everything. I've always questioned religion. I've always questioned politics. And I've always just felt out of sorts with what everybody else was doing. So
That questioning nature that you have, did that ever cause any issues for you?
yeah, I mean, my entire life, it's the story of my life, really. I mean, uh, just people don't people don't like when you they love tradition, and they love heritage, and they love patterns and habits and everything. And if you don't, and they're very insecure about it. So if you don't, you know, if you're, first of all, if you don't follow along at all, and then they get upset. But if you vocally speak out against it, they get very, very upset. So, and most of my life, I kind of just didn't follow along. But now that I've gotten older and I've seen what's really going on with the world, I speak out very, very vocally against it. And the pushback is tremendous, tremendous. So
So your regular, typical Gen X childhood moved into your teenage years where you didn't really fit in, but you weren't also an outcast. You just were kind of, it sounds like on the fringe of things, like a foot in both worlds.
yeah,
What happened in your 20s? What were your 20s like?
drugs. uh, just experimenting with drugs, and especially in my early to mid 20s, which was around the millennium passing. I lived in the Northeast, in New Jersey, so I had access to Philadelphia and New York club scenes. And at that time, the party club drugs were very, like, under the radar, so everything was free and open. And the MDMA, ecstasy in particular, is very, very uninhibiting. Like, it releases your inhibitions, and that's what kind of made me become less extra introverted and more extroverted at the time. But it was also a very unconscious time for me, because I was just all about the party and all about the women and all about the lifestyle. And I was completely disconnected from anything important. I don't even want to know how much money I blew on that stuff, because in that environment, it's omnipresent. It's not like just on the weekend. It was multiple days a week. But it was harmful in a lot of ways, but it was also good in a lot of ways. It just um, kind of broke me out of my shell a little bit. So, and I'm still introverted in a lot of ways. But if you like you and I, like, we have a lot in common, and we're talking about real shit. So, like, I can say that. Can I say shit?
Yeah, help
Okay.
do whatever you need to do.
All right, cool. I mean, I don't want to be vulgar or anything, but I do curse. But when I'm talking with somebody about real stuff, real things, then I can talk your head off. We could talk about the universe and spirituality and food and uh, the globalist agendas to harm us, which I'll talk about later on, all day. But if you just want to talk about football or TV or whatever, I'm just going to go sit down and play with your dog or something. I'm not interested at all. So,
I think then you're more
um,
of a selectrovert.
yeah, that's what I've become. Like, I was very introverted at that time, but then once I kind of the alarm went off, basically when um, the alarm went off a little bit when I had my kids, and then it really went off when like people just weren't growing out of it, and there were a lot of them were dying of overdoses, and a lot of them were throwing their life away. It was kind of like, it's time to grow up and move on, and people weren't doing that. And I was like, I can't be doing this my whole life. This is a waste. I've uh I've got the message. I need to put the phone down and kind of evolve, I guess. So that was my 20s mostly.
So you move into your 30s, and what changes that now that you have this realization that, the party life is has got a night it needs to end?
Well, I kind of fell back into that in my 30s when I got divorced from my first wife. And I was 31 at the time, so I'm like, all right, I'm still young, I still got it. Let's go out and have fun and basically restart my old life that I had before I married her when I was 26 and I had my kids and then but I think I had moved on like mentally and spiritually too much. Either that or things had devolved in like socially for everyone else so quickly that it was just shocking. Like everybody was just out of their freaking minds, and I was like, and it was, and they were dragging me down and making me do horrible, awful things, like just acting crazy, like crazy jealous kind of things and everything. And I was at the point where um, I felt like I just didn't. I was never. I was really trying to settle down again, and everybody I was talking to was just crazy, and they were making me crazy. But I had to accept a lot of responsibility for that myself because I was attracting people on my wavelength at the time. So I really just felt like I needed to break away and work on myself and be alone. And that's when my current wife came into the picture. And it's so weird because I met her on Facebook, and this was back in the late 2000s during like the Ron Paul revolution days, the end the Fed days, and we all had friends in common, and so we were just friends. And one day she sent me. You used to be able to send these things on Facebook called Buddha blessings, or silly little things that you can give people like just to say hi, like little gifts, GIF images or whatever. And I asked her if she was a Buddhist, and that was just took off the whole conversation. Like she's not a Buddhist, but I do identify with a lot of the Buddhist spiritual teaching. So that just took off the friendship, and we just became friends. And at the time, I was working in Atlantic City in the casinos for most of my adult life, and that whole city was just falling to pieces. And I knew after the 2007, 2008 economic emergency, I started learning about economics, and I knew that that city was just going to keep on descending, into the pit just by the way they were running things and the way the economy was going. And I was like, I got to get out of here. And New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the whole country, and it's full of some of the most unconscious people you can imagine. I mean, I'm sure there's exceptions, but for the most part, it's full of some really, really ignorant, um, unaware people. I don't want to say that in a negative way because most people are that way, but and I really felt like if the emergency ever got to the point where it was destined to go just by the way they were running things, which was way worse than the 2007 collapse, those people were just going to eat each other, and I needed to get out of there. So when I met my wife, she lived in Mississippi. We just got really close, and I flew down in January of 2010, which would have made me 36 years old, 35 maybe. And we just hit it off. It was like Providence. It was fireworks. It was awesome. She was just this awesome person and she needed to be saved and I needed to be saved. And we just kind of like lifted each other up, and she introduced me to Eckhart Tolle in particular, who I read his book A New Earth, which I recommend to literally everybody going through like an existential spiritual crisis because it really teaches you about the ego and how it directs your life, and you can start seeing the ego in other people so that you become a lot less judgmental and take things a lot less seriously, or I'm sorry, personally, in their behavior, which helps you, just have a lot more peace and stability in your life. So it just took off from there. I started learning about Alan Watts and Jiddu Krishnamurti and Adyashanti and these spiritual teachers, and started learning that all of them were pretty much teaching the same thing about, not letting the external world and their external labels and your identities define who you are and let it tear you to pieces, basically. So um, that was basically my 30s, just a lot of spiritual awakening, and um, I went through like a fantastic spiritual awakening once I moved down here. Man, I thought I was just in total nirvana. I mean, I was just like tuned with everything, and but like if you read Eckhart or have any kind of understanding of the ego doesn't really care what it attains as long as it's searching for something. And once it got bored with being spiritually enlightened, it was like, all right, what next? What's now? What do we do now? What's next? And I'm like, there is nothing else. You've literally attained the secrets of existence and the universe. There's nothing else. And it's kind of like yawn. Okay. And then that's when you go through your dark night of the soul, I guess they call it.
Yeah.
So I've been experiencing peaks and valleys in that dark night ever since. That's been about 13 years now. It's pretty crazy. It's a long journey, and it doesn't make it any harder living in this world, any easier living in this world with all of the things going on that are, keeping people in fight or flight and fear and everything. So
Have you ever read Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now?
I did not, because I read that was his first book, and A New Earth was his second book. So I never read. I think I've seen quotes and excerpts from it, but I never read that actual book because I already read A New Earth. So I figured it was probably just very similar um, to A New Earth. I read Stillness Speaks, um, which is it's kind of written in the same way as like the Tao Te Ching in a series of verses that are like kind of like free form, like each verse stands alone. It doesn't have like a pattern or anything. It's just and so that I read that, and then I got into a lot of Alan Watts. I read The Way of Zen by Alan Watts, and he has a 10-hour lecture series called Out of Your Mind, which I listened to probably 100 times. It's so hilarious and so deep and meaningful. He used to have a boat out in California that he held lectures in, and they recorded them all. And this uh, publishing company called Sounds True put them all together in like a 10-hour series, and it's just life altering. And then I read Freedom from the Known by Krishnamurti, which is some very, very hard hitting, very, very deep, very, very advanced spiritual stuff. I mean, he will take everything that you believe in and just burn it with gasoline. It's really crazy. Uh, he still he still gets to me today when I read his stuff. So, how about
Um,
you? What was you've read The Power of Now?
yeah, I read that one. I've read a lot. I've definitely listened to Mr. Watts. We're similar in a lot of those ways for sure. So
Nice.
I can understand, it's like in my 20s, I got married and eventually we had kids. And so my 20s was more about being the homemaker and that kind of stuff. But you get, I got so, I don't want to say trapped, but it was like I was closed off from the world,
Mhm.
and that's when I really started consuming podcasts and things like that. So that was kind of how I started the spiritual part, but um have since I think once you get started on that path, it doesn't really stop. Maybe it goes in spurts, but you're always, you know, learning something and adding it to your arsenal of knowledge, I think.
Yeah.
So after you've come to these peaks and valleys of spirituality, how did you then transition to the physical health aspects that you embody?
Sure. Well, I've off and on, I've always been into bodybuilding and weightlifting and nutrition and everything. I started bodybuilding when I was 13. And then in my 20s, that really it was really erratic during the 20s because there was all the partying, and then in my late 20s I was married with kids, so it was hard to keep up with. Well, it's not hard to keep up with. I just had other priorities, unfortunately. And then throughout most of my 30s, it was the same, just priorities getting in my way. And then during the whole spiritual awakening and everything, I got, awakened to current affair, like real current affairs, not like the cable news and high school history versions of current affairs, but really figuring out what's going on behind the scenes, and you know, I hate to mention his name. Alex Jones played a huge initial role in that, and especially learning about the eugenics conspiracy against us. So, and I started learning about like real food, and I started watching documentaries like Food Inc. and The Future of Food, about how our food is grown and everything, and I was kind of horrified by that. But I hadn't joined the whole thing together between like the eugenics conspiracy and the food conspiracy. I just thought it was just like food technology that had gone astray, and it turned out it just wasn't very good for us, and we needed to return to more traditional ways of raising food and eating food. Um, so, but I was off and on with all of that throughout most of my 30s and my 20s. What really woke me up to get my stuff together permanently was COVID, because when COVID first hit, it was so much shock and awe, and everything accelerated so quickly that I really thought this was like the end of of society that they had been kind of talking about, so they can, the whole problem reaction solution paradigm where they wanted to knock everything down so they can build it back up in their image, kind of. And I really thought that things were about to get really, really tough. So I was like, this is no time for weakness. Um, let me why not let me back up. You might want to edit that part out because I left out a key part of that whole thing. So
Sure. Whatever,
um,
whatever it makes sense.
yeah, I'm so sorry. Like, this is really important. I
No,
completely skipped over it.
don't apologize. This is great.
Sure. So pre-COVID in 2019, I had a job. I had a career in restaurant management, and I was making a very good income, and I was starting to build that upper middle class dream life, that kind of everybody wants. I was going on vacations to Arizona, the Grand Canyon with my kids and everything I always wanted to do, but just didn't have the financial stability to do. And unfortunately, one of the waitresses that I was working with filed a harassment complaint against me. And in the corporate world, see, growing up in the 90s, working in like the casinos that I worked in Atlantic City, like sexual harassment was explicit sexual harassment, if you know what I mean. Not to get too involved in it, but it was like, perform certain favors for me and I'll give you a job, or I'll give you a raise, or if you don't, I'll fire you, that sort of thing.
Right.
And I made the most innocent comment to some of the girls there about the way that I used to be before I got married. Like, they were talking about how mean guys were and everything, and all I laughed was, how terrible men were. And I was like, and I just laughed and said, I'm glad y'all didn't know me before I got married. And someone took that to HR, and I got fired for it. So
Wow.
uh, actually, it turns out in retrospect the best thing that ever happened to me. But at the time, it was it was a severe upheaval in my life. It was putting a lot of strain in my marriage because, are you doing inappropriate things with these women, and it looks really bad, and it looks a lot bad. It looks a lot worse than it really was. Sexual harassment, but it really wasn't. But whatever. Um, but I was very, very depressed for a while because once that albatross is hung around your neck, it doesn't go away. And I had never ever applied for a job that I didn't get. Like, if I applied for a job and got an interview for it, it was mine. Every
Right.
single time in my entire life, I was like, I don't know. I don't even know how many jobs I got, but I was batting 100 literally, and I probably had at least a dozen quality restaurant management interviews, where they just absolutely loved me and wanted me on the team, and then they all ended abruptly with, "We're sorry, we moved on with someone else," and that was almost certainly because they called my HR at the restaurant I was working at, and they said, "No, don't hire this guy." So it became very, very depressing. I went from a $60,000 a year restaurant management job to probably like a $24,000 a year construction job. Just get, like, and I was, 47 years old, something like that, and working in construction as a construction hand and just getting my butt kicked every day, sunburn, filth, just achy and just getting killed. And it was very, very depressing. So it's such a weird, innocuous thing. But in my high school yearbook, one of my football coaches wrote, "No matter what, always hit the iron." And that has always been my guide stone, kind of my guiding light. Whenever things were bad, I was like, just go to the gym. So I started going to the gym in like October of 2019, and it just like yanked me right out of my depression. I was like fully alive again, and it was awesome. And it was kind of like not allowing the external circumstances of your life to affect your emotional and spiritual well-being, so getting regular doses of endorphins and adrenaline and uh, dopamine at the gym, whatever, all the things that it does, and starting to look and feel better, obviously, too, did that for me. So then when COVID hit, I really thought that our society was about to collapse totally collapse. So I was like, this is no time for weakness, and that really, really set me off in the gym. I don't think I have actually missed a day at the gym that wasn't like strategic. Like, I do bodybuilding shows, so the last week before you do a bodybuilding show, you don't work out. But other than that, I have been to the gym like literally every day I've never just said, I don't feel like working out today, I'm not going. I've been that like dialed in, disciplined with it. So, um, and then, you know, around that time, uh, around the time when COVID hit, some of my friends at the gym who are bodybuilders encouraged me to get into the sport. They're like, you can get in there and crush it. You look awesome. And I just fell back in love with bodybuilding again, like I hadn't been since like the '90s when, those like Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman were the big guys, and I kind of fell out of love with it, but I got back into that kind of culture again, and so that's basically how I train, is like a bodybuilding style workout program, but it's not actually necessary for everybody to do, but that's what I do. If that made sense, all of that.
Yeah. No, it's great. So you got back into bodybuilding,
Mhm.
and when did you decide to do your first show?
uh, I did my first show in November of 2022, and it was probably around, it was probably in the spring of that same year that I was encouraged to do it. You know what I mean? So I basically just, I just basically tightened my diet up and started preparing for that show, because it was the furthest show away in my region at the time that I was encouraged to do it. So I just went for it. It was a men's physique show, which well, there's different categories of bodybuilding, but the category I entered was men's physique, which is a newer division where it's more focused on aesthetics. It's like they're looking for a beach body kind of guy. They're not looking for a mass monster or an Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of guy. They're just looking for a guy who's built like like a beach body. So you go up there in basically swim trunks, and there's not really much focus on your legs. It's just all upper body, and you go up there and you basically pose like a model for about 15 seconds, and then you're done. So, um,
And how did
but
you do with your modeling?
well, that show in particular, unfortunately, I only entered in my age group, and nobody else entered, so I won by default. But as far as the experience itself, um, it was I was never that shredded and defined and aesthetic in my entire life. I did a really good job on it, considering I was my own coach and everything. And I didn't even count macros or track macros or anything. I just ate and worked out, and it just worked out, uh, you know, perfectly. I was probably down to about 5% body fat and or less. I don't even know. I didn't try. I didn't measure it. I was just very, very peeled, and it did really well. It was quite an experience, and I kind of got hooked on the experience of being on stage and people yelling at me like in a positive way. And just so I did two more shows in last year in the it's called the classic physique category, which was created. There used to be one category, but the style of the bodybuilders in that open category became like these giant mass monsters, and it moved away from the more aesthetic Schwarzenegger, Ferrigno type people who are very, very aesthetic and very, very shapely. Um, so they created the classic physique division and put a weight cap on your height so that you couldn't get too big. And you had to be that. And the way they judged you was basic, was on that more aesthetic, shapely, um, you know, Schwarzenegger type uh, physique. And you do a lot more posing there. There's many poses that you do, and you can do a posing routine at the show. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to show off and not just be up there for 15 seconds and then be done. So I did two shows there, and I did really well. Um, I didn't have a coach, so I kind of just winged it as far as like my diet and everything was concerned. So I didn't get quite as conditioned as I probably would have needed to do better. So if I do another show, I'll probably hire a coach. But
Sometimes coaches make all the difference, right?
yeah, it's well. See, I'm at in on my first show, I was keto, and then during my contest prep for the two shows this year, because I was keto, I went carnivore in the final weeks of my first show prep because I wanted to devote as many calories to fat and protein as possible. So I cut out all my plants and I was just eating meat, and I fell in love with that. Not just the simplicity of it, but the way I felt. I fell in love with it, and I just stayed that way. So I'm going to have to find someone who's going to be willing to go through a 16-week contest prep and not tell me to eat any carbs. It should be interesting if I do it again, which I might not. I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
I mean, from what I see, it's easy for you to maintain that carnivore lifestyle. Like you said, the
Right.
simplicity, right? You go to the grocery
Mhm.
store and your basket's full of meat, maybe some cheese, maybe a couple of spices or sauces, but not a whole
Mhm.
lot,
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite meals that you've come up with?
Uh, my most common meal is just ground beef with smoked salt and butter. Maybe a little sriracha sometimes. That's the simplicity of it. There's not really any recipes involved. You could add cheese if you want and jazz it up a little bit, but as you dial down your restrictions and you get used to you get your body, your taste buds and your palate adjusts. So when I eat ground beef and smoked salt, it tastes like heaven to me. Whereas like someone on a standard American diet might think that's too plain, because they're eating foods that are loaded with chemical flavor enhancers and artificial flavors and whatnot. It's deadening their taste buds. But I'm so dialed in for so long that the simplest things, if I eliminated salt for long enough, I could probably just eat plain ground beef with no seasonings in it at all, and it would be good.
I,
But I don't. Sorry.
I can definitely relate because
Yeah.
I have been on a cleaner eating path for at least 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite go-to meals is ground beef seasoned with homemade taco seasoning,
Hmm.
so I can control the quality of the ingredients.
Very good.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
So I can relate. And I think it tastes wonderful. And people look at me like you're crazy. You eat the same thing like 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm over here like, it's so easy.
Most people just don't understand. They don't understand the way the food industry manipulates their taste buds and what it does to their ability to taste food. Like all of these chemicals that they put in the food, the artificial flavors, the flavor enhancers, the MSG and whatnot. You become accustomed to eating all that, so that if you don't have that in your food, it doesn't taste any good. That's. So. if you don't have massive amounts of that and massive amounts of sugar and especially the fat and the sugar combination, which they found out is super, super addictive. But and it's super, super palatable, hyper palatable, they call it. They if you're not used to if you're used to eating that way, simple foods will taste awful because there's no flavor to it. There's nothing to spike your taste buds, to taste it. You have to let your taste buds heal and recover, and then suddenly, just the simplest things are bursting with flavor. So
Yeah. Yeah. There's literally food scientists or flavor scientists, and
yeah,
they're paid to concoct these things that are super addictive. And just like you said, they warp your taste buds to a point where if you're not getting these chemicals and these flavorings, then it just doesn't taste good. And I just think that's sad.
yeah. Well, that's the kind of thing I'm going to get into when you ask me about the big thing.
Yeah.
I'm not
So,
ready for that, but
so what was
when
your
we go,
big thing?
well, so I started learning about the globalist eugenics movement and the social engineers. And if you read, like, everybody loves Bertrand Russell, but he was like one of the most awful people in history. I mean, like, not in history perhaps, but he was an awful person. He wrote a book called The Impact of Science on Society, where he talked about science was literally going to turn human beings into basically what you see today, just a bunch of sick, mindless, automatons who can't think for themselves and who are distracted by, but are just obsessed with distractions and trivium and unable and unwilling to see the world as it is, because if they were to see the world as it is, then they wouldn't be able to watch football, and they wouldn't be able to party in the bars and everything that we're told is normal social behavior. So when I learned about that and then I put it into the context of what they're doing to the food, it became obvious to me that the way the food is today is not an accident at all. It was done on purpose. Um, first and foremost, it's made to be addictive. So that, like you were saying, they hire these food chemists that literally construct um, chemicals to put in the food to make you addicted to them. And one thing that I learned in my early, like, food awakening journey, probably back in, like, 2008, 2009, maybe 2010. This was back then, so, like, God knows how many chemicals are in there now, but there were upwards of 19,000 different chemicals that food creators were allowed to put in their food off label, because of a loophole, in the FDA that said
Hmm.
that if it was going to affect their bottom line, they can list it off label. So anytime you see artificial or natural flavors, that's basically what it is. Like,
Right.
if it's a natural flavor, why wouldn't you just put the natural flavor itself on the label? Well, because if you knew what it was, like cyanide is natural, right? Um, so if you knew what it was, you wouldn't eat it. So they just put it under natural flavors. And not to get gross or anything, but one of the most, stark examples of natural flavors is the natural vanilla flavor, which is
I know. Oh God.
the anal gland secretions of a beaver. Like, and who found that out? Who looked at a
Like
beaver's anus and decided it tasted like vanilla? But
I was
um,
appalled, thinking about how milk came to be, and I really just can't even process how the anal glands from a beaver came to be. Like, oh my God, people are weird.
right, right. So I realized that it wasn't done by accident, and and then I started learning that the medical schools were actually ran and funded and by the pharmaceutical industry, and the pharmaceutical industry was basically writing the curricula for these medical schools
Yep.
that our doctors were going to. And I learned that the doctors were nothing but, street level drug dealers for pharmaceutical kingpins.
Yes.
And they don't know anything about nutrition, so everything that they were telling you was a total lie. And then it got kind of even deeper when I found out that the dietitian academies were run by the same pharmaceutical industries, and also by big food like Kellogg's and Pepsi and Coca-Cola and McDonald's. They basically run dietitian schools, and they're the ones that taught the dietitians to tell you, don't worry about what you eat, just worry about how much you eat. Eat less and move more, which
Right.
is
Or the food pyramid, that was gifted to us by Kellogg's themselves
yeah,
so they could sell more grains.
Yeah, like eat less and move more is the biggest recipe for disaster you can possibly imagine because nothing's going to make you more hungry
And
and
nothing
more.
is going to stress out your body on the
Yeah,
cellular level, like not having the building blocks to convert to energy to do that
right.
kind of stuff. It's
Yeah,
awful.
yeah, and that this is the foundation of our nutritional science is like calories in, calories out, and it's the and calories are just literally meaningless. Calories is a unit of energy. Um,
What do you
you know,
mean? Are you telling me that if I eat a Snickers and it's the same amount of calories as an apple, that they're not the same?
no, they're not the same. No, and
Oh, wow.
a lot of people don't realize like the whole out paradigm is based on the first law of thermodynamics, which explicitly states that it only applies to a closed system, which the human body is very obviously not a closed system.
Right.
A little bit more complex than a bomb calorimeter that they use to determine how much, calories a food has. But not only that, it's a very, very poor approximation of, like art, like when they say how many calories is in a food, it's a very poor approximation. And legally, they're allowed to be plus or minus 20% off in how many
Wow.
calories are in a food item. So it's impossible to determine how much calories is in a food. And then it doesn't account for the hormonal effects on your insulin and whatnot, and the thermodynamic effect of food, like protein makes your body temperature go up. You know what I mean? It doesn't account for that, so you burn more calories. A lot of protein doesn't get used for energy; it gets converted, to muscle tissue and a lot of fat doesn't get burned for energy; it gets converted towards brain matter and cellular membranes and whatnot. So there's all kinds of things going on. Not to mention how much of it is excreted in your when you go to the bathroom. So it's really ridiculous on its face if you think about it. And a lot of people will, you know, think I'm in a caloric deficit. Why aren't I losing weight? And that's why. I mean, it's almost entirely hormonal. Whether or not you're hungry or not is hormonal, and whether or not you gain or lose weight is almost entirely hormonal. And that's why it's so important to eat a species appropriate diet, because if you do, your body kind of takes care of all that. Your body will tell you when you're hungry and when you're not. And when you're not hungry on a species appropriate diet, you won't eat. Like that was the problem with me when I was bodybuilding. If I wanted to bulk, I had to eat when I wasn't hungry, and it's disgusting. Like I could put the most delicious food in front of me, and I'm looking at it, and my gag reflexes are activating. I don't want to eat it. It's awful. So, but I got kind of off track there. So when I realized that it was all like on purpose, and and then the whole COVID thing came around, and they were like, everything that they were telling us to do was the most unhealthy, insane things possible. Stay indoors and stay away from people. Don't go outside. Wear a mask outside and don't take your kids out to play. They were arresting parents who brought their kids to the playground, and they were boarding up the basketball hoops and everything. It was literally insane. And then stressing people out. Like people don't realize how bad stress will kill them just as much as anything else. Everybody was just in a constant state of, you could see it in their eyes. Everybody was just, their eyes are all wide and they were all freaked out constantly. And then they're wondering why they got sick. And it was just all total insanity. And when I coupled all that together, I was like, man, if you people want to kill me, you're going to have to get personal. I am not doing it for you. And a lot of that had to do with also with COVID, like nobody wanted to hear this, but most of the people who died of COVID had multiple comorbidities. They were obese, they had diabetes, they had cancer, they had hypertension. Like they were in terrible health already. They were already like one foot out the door and the other on the banana peel, and then they got COVID. And nobody wanted to hear that. I'm like, you're sick with COVID because you were sick already, like, and so I, you know, I almost did it as to put it in the face of everybody. Like, I am never gonna get COVID because I don't, debauch my body on a daily basis like most people do. Um, and then it kind of just became like I started learning more and more and more about everything, and it was like I learned that, you know, even before COVID, it has to be a lot worse right now. It was something like 80% of the people in our country were metabolically unhealthy. They had at least one metabolic disorder, like whatever it was, overweight, or pre-diabetic, insulin resistant, whatever. and then like 70% were overweight, and approaching 50% are obese. And that's just, and everybody's like, well, why do you care? Like, why do you care what other people do with their bodies? And I'm like, because I live in society. Um, I don't want to live in a society. We're all interdependent on each other. I don't want to live in a society where everybody is useless to themselves and can't be of any benefit to me. Like I need them to be a benefit to me. They need me to be a benefit to them. And they're all like just destroying themselves. And they're all just sitting around drinking beer and not producing anything productive in society. And we're falling apart in large part because of it. Hey, can we take a break for a second? I just want to get a drink of water.
Yeah, I'm gonna push pause.
All right, cool. Cool. All right.
Okay, so COVID really enlightened you, so to speak, for how things really are, and what did that motivate you to do? What did you decide that you could do about it?
Well, it was just really a reminder of everything that I'd known. Like like they say knowledge is power, but it's not really power. It's putting that knowledge into practice that's power. So I've known about all of this stuff for years, and uh I kind of just like like we've talked about how addictive the food is. So um the addicted mind will, you can give it all the knowledge it wants, but it'll set the cognitive dissonance in and make you kind of ignore it, like there's the voice going off in the back of your head telling you not to eat that chocolate cake, and you ignore that voice because you're just mindlessly doing things. So what COVID did for me was just shut that voice down that was telling me, that part of me anyway that was ignoring my voice. So, you know, it just became like if it was harmful to me and it was meant to be harmful to me, I'm not going to put it in my body. And as I um as I dialed my lifestyle back and cut out all the crap, like everything started to feel so good that it was like I don't even need to eat cake or cookies or pizza or anything. The things that you supposedly need to do to enjoy life, because I enjoy life just fine. So why do I need to have alcohol every once in a while for it? Like one of my friends was like, "Don't you ever just want to splurge?" And I'm like, "No, why? I mean, why would I? Do I ever want to just eat cyanide? No. You know what I mean? Like, and it was really the hardcore realization as I learned more and more that the foods that we shouldn't be eating are not foods. Like even the things like wheat and corn and beans, like these are kind of like food, but they're not really human food. So they're not meant for humans to eat. Your digestive system isn't made to eat it. So, you know, and even things like broccoli and kale and whatnot, you're not really made to, you can derive some nutrition from that, but for the most part, it just gets passed through your digestive system right into the toilet. Um, so, and that's, really hardcore for me. Like, I feel like if you just ate whole foods, you would be a lot better off. But for me, it was the realization that the standard American diet foods were really not foods. The seed oils, the refined carbs, and the sugar were not food at all. They were drugs. They were literally drugs. And especially the sugar. Um, you get fact checked on this one. Uh, had a study that showed that sugar was 8 times more addictive than cocaine. So they're like, no, that's not true. All right, let's just say it's as addictive as cocaine, not 8 times more. That's still pretty terrible.
Right.
So I always tell people it's as addictive as any street drug. It fires up the same pleasure centers of your brains as street drugs. And I mean, they got rats addicted to cocaine, and then they put cocaine and sugar in the same cage with them, and the rats went for the sugar.
Right.
The rats preferred the sugar over the cocaine, even though they were addicted to cocaine. And but cocaine isn't available on every corner in America. The sugar is, and you have a whole society full of junkies who don't, who either don't know they're addictive or they think their addiction is cute. because it's food. Like, oh,
Right.
yeah, I'm addicted to cake. I'm addicted to donuts. I'm addicted to coffee. It isn't even coffee. It's just like a little bit of coffee with a bunch of sugar in it and seed oils. And they think it's cute, and they make jokes about it. And I'm like, imagine if you went into a heroin den and everybody was just making cute jokes about their heroin use. You know what I mean? Like, I see it so much. I see it. Just how that's the lens I see it in. Like,
Yeah.
I don't see people eating food. I see people injecting drugs into their body, but they're just eating it instead of injecting it or smoking it or snorting it or whatever. That's just how I see it. And I think that's the reality of it, though. I mean, if you really take into account what they did to the food, it was designed to make you addicted. And it was designed to make you sick and fat and stupid and weak and anxious and depressed so you can go to the pharmaceutical industry for all their drugs to cure it. And it doesn't even cure it, of course,
No, it just
because
masks the symptoms so
yeah,
that you feel better and can continue to consume the crap.
right, yeah. I mean, that's the whole medical, pharmaceutical, nutrition matrix right there. Is it's all designed from the literature to the actual food on the shelves to your doctor to your nutritionist. It's all designed to make you a client, and not a free person. Not a, you know what I mean? And not to mention the government likes it because if your brain is complete mush all the time, that makes you more open to suggestion and more open to their fear monger, their constant incessant fear mongering and keeping you under fight or flight and stress so that you have to go to them and say, protect me, do something. That's our. I mean, if that doesn't describe our entire society, I don't know what rock you're living under. It's on the news every day. It's coming from our government officials every day, and it's just constant. Um, you know, everybody is just tugging at you to not be yourself and to be a sovereign, free human being. So, um, and I don't know how much longer I have left on this world, but I'm not going to. I'm going to spend my remaining days as a free person, as someone who can think for himself and isn't isn't moved by the hive mind or excuse me, I'm burping. Lots of editing, sorry.
It's
Um
okay.
uh when I talk like this I get like a lot of so
A lot of energy is moving. I get it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that was my big thing, just understanding that I was under attack and it wasn't accidental, and I just wasn't going to do it to myself. And and not to mention, like I said earlier, once I got out of it, once I simplified and broke everything out that wasn't supposed to be there, life is still enjoyable, very enjoyable. And even if you don't make it all about food, even if he did make it all about food, like like we say, don't live to eat, eat to live. But I do both. I mean, my food is incredible, and it's as basic as it gets. I mean, it's beef, mostly beef, sometimes chicken, eggs, and butter. I haven't been eating a lot of cheese lately because it doesn't terribly agree with me, but I will eat cheese sometimes. But it's mostly beef, eggs, and butter in different steaks and roasts and ground beef and whatnot. And I I enjoy it immensely. I mean, I'm not just like, some people are like I get bored. I'm like, why? Why do you get bored with eating? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't know. That
I
might
think
just go
maybe
back to
they don't have the refined taste buds, right?
that too, but I think it really just goes back to my original, what we talked about earlier, where I was just, I just never fit in and I never felt the need to conform to social norms or anything. And it's just like, I think that people want their food to not be quote unquote boring because that's what the culture and the marketing and the propaganda has instilled in them throughout generations. Really, it's just become like everything. I gave a class at my fire academy on nutrition, and I told them everything the way that you eat is based almost entirely on marketing and propaganda. It has nothing to do with nutrition or even what you want to eat yourself. It's all based on cultural, uh, you know, programming and engineering through marketing, really. I mean, the whole cholesterol and saturated fat causes heart disease was marketing. It was marketing to sell sugar and seed oils, which is a
Yeah.
real cause of heart disease and cancer and all that. But they said, no, it's not the seed oils and the sugar that's making everybody giving away heart disease. It's the saturated fat and the cholesterol and the red meat, which is your ancestral diet that you've been eating for millions of years.
Right.
And people,
Meanwhile, you need cholesterol. Like that's the response when your body's under stress. So if you stop eating the stuff that's stressing your body out, your cholesterol will go down. You
yeah,
also need fat for your brain. Like
hmm
your brain literally runs on fat. So the idea that it's, fat and the cholesterol is demonstrably false. Yet, how many people still believe that with their whole heart because that's what they were taught?
literally every day, someone says to me, "Oh my God, you eat nothing but meat and butter, you're going to die." And they'll stand right in front of me. And I'm not trying to, toot my own horn here, but I am a very, very built person. I'm a very athletic person. I have a very, very low body fat. I am obviously, um, I'm obviously an upper tier athletic human being, especially for someone my age. I'm 49. So, and they'll stand right in front of me and tell me that I'm going to die because I eat nothing but meat and eggs. And I'm like, yeah, image isn't, the entirety of it, like 'cause some people don't look sick, but they are. But I'm like, come on. uh, do I look like I'm dying? Do I look like I'm going to keel over from a heart attack right now?
Right.
And and it's not just the way I looked. I mean, when I went to the fire academy, I was with 30 people, 30 other people, most of them way less than half my age. I have two kids. They're 21 and 23, and almost everybody in the class was younger than them. And with the exception of two or three kids, I smoked everybody in that class physically. So, but they'll still be like, how's your cholesterol? And I'm
Well,
like, how's your testosterone? Because if you're not eating cholesterol, your testosterone's probably in the tank along with your
didn't
other
you
hormones.
didn't you just recently get all your lab work done?
Yeah,
And it came
yeah.
back just fine.
I wouldn't say just fine. Most of the markers were well within accepted health norms. My cholesterol, especially my LDL, was exceptionally high, which means absolutely nothing. My LDL, I believe, was 250. Um, my triglycerides were in the tank though. There was no triglycerides, which is usually a lot of people. If you watch like Bart K will say every one of those markers is utterly meaningless. He's a very very he's schooled in that, so he has degrees in that kind of stuff. He's very very blunt, and it took me a while to get used to his commentating style because I think he's Australian and he is savage. But I mean, for one thing, dietary cholesterol has nothing to do with blood cholesterol, has nothing to do with heart disease. Absolutely nothing. Heart disease is entirely inflammatory.
Yep.
Um, and there was actually, I'm actually seeing, how you might have noticed a lot of people are starting, a lot of like neurologists are starting to figure out that Alzheimer's and dementia is actually type 3 diabetes. It's a metabolic disorder of the brain. Um, and a lot of heart surgeons are now starting to come to the conclusion that everybody who has a heart attack is also diabetic, whether they're diagnosed or not. So, there's basically two root causes of disease, and it's hyperinsulinemia, which is chronically elevated insulin, to the point where your insulin, your liver is pumping out so much insulin that it's not doing anything anymore. It's not, it's like developing a tolerance to a drug, and then inflammation, and I think something like half the people who have heart attacks have perfectly normal cholesterol. It's completely meaningless. So and yet, like I said, every single day, somebody's going to say something to me about my heart health. It's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, you just
I
tell them
had a
drop and give me 20.
Yeah. Now I had a guy he recently had what's called a widowmaker heart attack,
Hmm.
where there was no previous symptoms. He just had a heart attack and almost died. And he came to me asking me about nutrition, and I laid it out for him. I'm like, and I hit hard. I'm like, if you want to live, then this is what you need to do. And he said, I can't do that. My doctor said I can't eat like that because I'll have another heart attack. Meanwhile, he was talking about he was real glad to get back to eating his honey buns.
Oh,
And
that just
I,
breaks my heart.
yeah, and I like I can't even talk to you anymore. Like I feel bad for him, and he's a nice guy and everything, but when I see him, I just kind of wave at him. I can't even interact with those people. It's just it's too heartbreaking. I'm like, 'cause I just want to smack him and be like, you're
Smack
killing
the honey
yourself.
bun out of their
Yeah.
hand.
Like you're killing yourself. Your doctor's a quack. And I'm like, how do you not know this in the current year? You know, it's the confirmation bias that I have is like I drive by the McDonald's and I'm like, how do you people not know that that's poison? You know, that the line will be wrapped around the building, and I'm like, my God, I figured
Yeah.
that out 15 years ago.
Yeah. The last time I ate fast food like Taco Bell, McDonald's, that kind of stuff was probably 16 years ago, you know? It's just nasty and it hasn't improved since then. And there, I don't know, you've probably seen, but there's that one fella who has that box of fries from McDonald's. It is now 17 years old and hasn't decayed one bit.
Yeah,
That is not
yeah,
food.
yeah. Throw a burger out in your yard and see if any of the birds or animals eat it. They won't.
No,
They won't.
no, the ants won't even go for it in the parking lot. Like, I don't know how the seagulls survive, but
Yeah. Uh, yeah, literally the most unhealthy thing that you can eat is French fries fried in seed oil. And
yeah.
and uh and I'm like, you're giving this to your kids probably multiple times a week during their formative years. And and they just stare at you like a deer in the headlights. They're like, what else am I supposed to feed them? I'm like,
Go home and cook.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, that's another problem. That's another problem where they just got us by the balls. Is back in the 50s and 60s when everybody was relatively healthy, you had one income households, so you know probably the mom was home cooking dinner, home
Yep.
home cooked meals, and then the feminist movement took over, so that which was put out there by the Rockefeller, so they can get the women in the workforce paying taxes,
Yep.
and everything
Destroy
just
that
keeps getting,
nuclear family.
yeah, destroy the nuclear family, and now everything gets worse and worse, and now nobody can really be home to cook meals because I mean, if there's a will, there's a way. I mean, there's a thing called a crock pot and a pressure
Yeah.
cooker.
I do meal prep
Um,
myself.
yeah, I mean, you can do it. It's possible. They make excuses. What it really comes down to, anytime anybody tries to like excuse their way out of it, it comes down to addiction. I mean, they don't want to do it because I mean, yeah, it's the most frustrating thing for people like you and I because they can look at me and be like, "Well, I don't want to look like you anyway." Right? I don't.
Well,
I
because this
mean,
happens by accident. Shut up.
yeah. Well, like, and regardless of the fact that you could work out and not look like me, like you could just do some regular weight training. You don't have to work out like a bodybuilder like I do. I can put you in a weight training program that will not make you bulky. You'll just be lean and muscular, right? But or you don't even have to. You could just do functional training and just look athletic, and not terribly muscular, whatever. But the hardest part is that I can't tell them. I can tell them until I'm blue in the face how amazing I feel, but I can't make them feel that for them. They have to
Right.
feel it.
Right.
And the only way for them to feel it is to break the addiction and go through the hell that they're going to have to go through to get to purge that crap out of their system, for 4 or 5, 6 days or even a week or more. And it sucks. It's terrible. It's literal drug withdrawal. And you're in a society where you're just inundated with it. It's like trying to go through heroin withdrawal in a heroin den. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Yep.
it's everywhere. And then, of course, all the other addicts want to sabotage you because they don't want you to get well. And
Crabs in a
you're,
bucket.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And your strength becomes a referendum on their weakness and their complete lack of self-control. So they, come on, just come out with us, have a drink, have a piece of cake, what? And like I deal with it every day. It's like,
Yep.
you know,
So
like
that's
they'll
one of
make,
the things about COVID that really got me is how everybody succumbed to the peer pressure so easily. I'm like, now I'm not, I don't know, I'm on the cusp of Gen X and a millennial, right? I'm in that special little generation. So
uh,
I had plenty of experiences as a kid being peer pressured, this and that. And I would say no. Like, was their peer pressure muscle never flexed? I don't know. But it seemed like so many people were just like, Well, everybody says I should, so I guess I'm gonna.
The
I
biggest,
don't have any place for that weakness in my world.
I this is off topic, it's something to talk about maybe another time, but when COVID was going on, I was very perplexed by that as well. I really thought, especially since right before COVID happened, the Epstein suicide, was all the rage, and everybody who was every normie on earth was going, Epstein didn't kill himself, and I'm like, yes, they're all waking up. This is it.
Yes.
This is the great awakening. And then COVID hit, and everybody was freaking out and sanitizing everything, and wearing masks, and even people see. And then that's when I started learning about like dark occult mind control, trauma based mind control. I started watching a lot of Mark Passio,
Mm-hmm.
um, and uh, and I started learning about different forms of mind control, and I kind of derived just from observing society that the biggest form of mind control there is the fear of the opinions of other people. Because I saw people who I knew the whole thing was bullshit. They knew COVID was bullshit, and they were against it and everything. And this isn't anything to worry about. It's a bad cold. Only people who are already sick are getting sick. And next thing you know, they're wearing masks. And not only are they wearing masks, but they're, getting angry at you for not wearing a mask because, again, it's like that whole, um, when you abstain from eating food, drug food, they don't like it because it makes them look bad for their lack of self-control. So when you don't wear a mask, it makes them look bad for being cowards and putting the
Yes.
mask on because they don't want everybody to look bad. Or, and I can't remember the quote. There was a quote by a woman who grew up in Germany during the Nazis, and she said the nicest people made the worst Nazis because they were so polite to their neighbors and everything, but they they would throw you under the bus if they found out you were a divergent or a Jew, or if you were hiding Anne Frank in your basement, your attic. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
it was the nicest people, but they first of all, they were, and that's another form of mind control was the law-abiding citizen. Like, I don't agree with it, but it's the law, so I'm going to obey it. So, and there was no rebellion at all in people. And how many businesses went under forever, and all they did was complain about it on Facebook. Oh my God, I can't pay my bills. They told us to shut my business down, and what am I going to do? And I'm like, don't shut your business down. If everybody didn't shut their business down, and they couldn't do anything. But everybody did.
Just,
And then
yeah.
the small group of people who resisted, they were just so easy to target. They're so easy to attack. And
Yeah.
um, so, where was I going with that?
I don't know, but
Um,
we're the small, tireless minority, and we're not going to worry about the opinions of sheep.
yeah, I mean that's I'm trying to figure out where I was going with that because it was. What did you ask me that put me on to that? Do you remember?
Let's see. We were talking about how food addiction and COVID and mind control, and people just kind of keeled over and started licking boots.
Yeah,
I don't know.
maybe I was just agreeing with you with like how you said like how you were shocked by how everybody just
Yeah.
went along with everything. Okay, so
Yeah.
hopefully, hopefully when we watch this, I didn't just go off on a tangent to nowhere.
Nah, I really think that a lot of what you have shared today is going to be valuable for people and give them an opportunity to think outside of their box that they might be
Sweet.
in, you know? So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for your time.
Yeah, it's
Is
awesome
there
talking.
is there anything you'd like to share before we wrap it up?
Um, I would just tell people that you aren't too important. Um, and I hate to put the whole thing on your shoulders, but I mean like what the individual does is what society becomes because society is made up of individuals. If you don't want the human race, I hate to say the human race, but it really comes down to this, to enter a period of darkness that they may not ever get out of, um, then start start taking your life back. Start becoming a free individual. Stop poisoning yourself for these maniacs. Stop turning yourself into an abomination of a human. Humans are made in the image of the creator, and they are gods walking the earth. There's literally nothing on earth like a human being. And there's definitely nothing on earth like an empowered, awakened human being. And get that fire burning in your heart again, and become alive and become empowered, because they want us to be weak, and they want us to be helpless and useless and scared. And I'm so sick and tired of it. I'm so sick and tired of being in a sea of helpless, scared, weak people. And I'm not judging anybody. It's just it's just disheartening, and it's humiliating, and it's so frustrating to have the key to health and wellness and empowerment and be shouting it from the mountaintops, and 9 out of 10 people not say to you, no, I think I'm just going to keep on destroying myself, and these are your loved ones and your friends, and we have to just sit there helplessly and watch it. And not to mention, most of them end up thinking you're crazy. And I think we were talking about, losing friends and family over it. I've lost a lot of friends and family over it, but um, I don't care if I was the last person on earth screaming it, I would scream it until my last breath. It's that important. Um, and That would be my message, man. Like, empower yourself. Don't be weak. Like, reject weakness and embrace discomfort. You're in a society that is addicted to comfort and luxury, and that's how they got you by the balls. Because you don't want to give up your comfort, and you don't want to get out of your comfort zone. And they just keep making everything more easy and more comfortable for you. And the more they do that, the more they control you. So get out of your comfort zone, and embrace discomfort and reject weakness. That's my message.
I love it. I love it a lot. Thanks for being dangerous. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Keep fighting.